Governor Daniels, Senator Long, and I, and other leaders of all three branches at the beginning of this year asked the Council of State Governments to spend some time here in Indiana examining what we do by way of corrections and criminal justice in general, to see what new ideas might make Indiana's population not only safer but less dependent on prisons than we are today. I think Indiana has always had both objectives in mind. Indiana believes in hammering those who deserve to be hammered, but trying to figure out which people deserve a second chance and might be a good risk. And I think this new initiative might best be thought of as being smarter at picking who fits into which category than we are now, and trying to make it possible for the people who have a chance for rehabilitation to get where we all want them to get. Yeah, we now spend a very substantial amount of money imprisoning people who aren't violent. And these are exactly the folks that we ought to be able to figure out how to hold accountable, hold to sanctions that are real, but do so in the places where they've got some support system, where they have some chance of a job, some chance of some additional training. And Indiana's done a lot of that, and including quite a number of very creative things in Northeast Indiana. I think the message there is that there's more to do that could be successful. If the small-time, non-violent offender population can be more effectively treated in community settings, whether they're the community corrections program, various forms of intensive probation, work release, those kinds of things, then this continued rise in the number of people that we're paying in very expensive prison beds, we ought to do the best we can to save the prison beds for the folks who are a genuine danger to their fellow citizens and really need to be there, and to sort them out. And the hope is that if we're more effective at doing that, that this continued rise in the prison population will level off. One of the great things that's happened in Allen County is the invention of what we call the reentry court. Judge Surbeck has created a system under which, in cooperation with the Department of Correction, people who are returning after being in prison are better monitored and better assisted in getting back on the straight and narrow. And this is a very different change from 10, 20, 30 years ago, in which people were let out of the prison with a bus ticket and good wishes and the address of a parole officer who was completely overwhelmed. So Allen County has, in particular, created a model that a lot of other places in Indiana are using. A very substantial number of people in prisons are repeaters, and anything you can do by way of treatment or training or community-based activity that helps reduce the recidivism rate is not only makes for a safer community, but saves money in the long run. This new initiative ought both to make people safer and save us money. It'll make us safer because we'll do a better job of sorting out who's really a threat from people who, yes, have committed a crime, but are probably not as serious a threat, and therefore ought to be sanctioned in a different way. And oh, by the way, that's less expensive than the average prison setting. There is a series of bills being drafted. A number of legislators have already indicated an interest in sponsoring these bills. Some of these are things that the executive branch and the judiciary can do on its own. A lot of it will have to be the subject of legislation. One of the proposals is that judges be given a little more discretion about non-suspendable sentences, which have found their way more and more into the criminal code, much more than they were when the code was written, which is now more than 30 years ago. So there will be a somewhat broader range of discretion for judges who would then decide whether suspension was the right thing, depending on how many, have we seen this person before? Is this a first offender or not? And if he's a second offender, what was the first offense like? And the kinds of things that I think most people would want taken into account before that decision was made.